Treasure Planet, released in 2002 after spending almost 10 years in development hell. It's based on the classic book by Robert Louis Stevenson, although, of course, the book is called Treasure Island and takes place on the sea, while this one was moved to a sci fi setting in space. It did, however, retain some stylistic elements from the original, mostly the spaceships. In this film, they are all essentially sailboats powered by futuristic engines and solar sails, and that alone makes the movie's aesthetic incredibly unique, creative, and amazing, quite simply. Few words about the story. Jim Hawkins is a rebellious teenager growing up in a tavern run by his mom. His father left years ago to traverse the seas, and Jim very clearly has issues that stem from growing up without a father figure. One day, a mysterious stranger crashes his ship next to the tavern, and quickly after, he dies. But not before revealing to Jim a golden sphere that is clearly very valuable, has some mystery around it, and is desirable by other people, as evidenced by pirates attacking right in the next scene and basically burning the tavern to the ground. Jim and his mom escape with the object, which then turns out to be a map leading to Treasure Planet, sorry, a planet on which the legendary pirate Flint left all his treasure. Jim then gets on a ship with a trustworthy captain and potentially not so trustworthy crew to find the planet. Now, the film's strength, much like the books, rests on this feel of adventure and also the central relationship between Jim Hawkins and Long John Silver. This is a character who's a cook on the ship, who seems jovial at first, but clearly has a more sinister side to him. The way that he becomes a mentor to Jim, essentially, over the course of the film, and the surrogate father figure as well. And on the other hand, the way that he warms up to the boy and becomes a kinder person are both done excellently. Especially as there's that other layer to the relationship, that Silver is not actually just a mentor, but he also is a villain of the film. But then again, he doesn't just turn into a complete villain. He still has that great fondness for Jim inside of him. So I think that duality and complexity of their whole relationship is magnificent and remains my favorite part of the film. The second thing that I remembered very well after my initial viewing back when the film came out was the incredible visuals. As I said before, the film merges the aesthetics of sailing and pirate adventures with classic science fiction, but it is also mixing things up in a purely technical aspect. It features 3 different animation techniques which work in concert, often all at the same time. The characters are traditionally hand-drawn in 2D. The cyborg elements of Silver, his right arm, right leg, and right eye, along with the robot character Ben, are rendered CGI. And finally, the spaceships are done with the deep canvas technique. The result back in the day was simply stunning. I did remember the film as one of the coolest looking animations from my childhood. I regret to say that now its age is starting to show, unfortunately, primarily in the deep canvas aspect. The ships, especially the main ship that the adventure takes place on, it just doesn't look that good anymore. You can plainly see how artificial and plastic it seems. The other elements are still completely fine, but since such a large part of the story takes place on the main ship, and since this is such a prominently featured part of the movie's aesthetic, it did take me out a little bit. Another thing that brought the movie down for me was the already mentioned robot character Ben. He shows up in the very last act of the film, and it's pretty much just there for comic relief. But he's also not funny at all. He's annoying. He has very strongly reminded me of Jar Jar Binks from Star Wars, which not good. However, that's not even my biggest issue with him. See, normally when you introduce a new character that late in the game, there needs to be a good reason for it. They need to be important to the plot in some way, and of course there has to be a reason why you couldn't introduce them earlier in some way, or used another established character to fulfill their purpose. Otherwise, it's just clunky writing, because someone new suddenly comes along and why? You have to ask that question. And the thing with Ben is that if you stop for a moment and think about his role, he could essentially be removed completely from the film and nothing would change about the story. The only things he does is give exposition 3 times, revealing things that the characters themselves could spot on their own. He's useless. He's useless and annoying. So again, the question is, why do you need him in the first place? Just get rid of this character entirely and let the more important ones have more breathing room, have additional screen time, for God's sake. Now, I know that may be a minor thing to some, but for me it kind of spoiled the entire third act of Treasure Planet, and as a result, between this and the aged animation and some of the pacing issues, I ended up being slightly disappointed because I remembered the film as being much better than it actually is. Which is unfortunate because I wanted to love it. I love sci-fi and I enjoy pirate stories, so a mix of those on paper sounds amazing. And on top of that, it's an incredibly ambitious movie on the technical level. And I guess that last part may have been its downfall after all, that ambition, because Treasure Planet was one of Disney's rare financial bombs. Between its huge budget and its remarkably lukewarm reception at the box office, as of 2011, the movie has still been at a loss of almost $80 million. That's huge. That's huge, and it was a reason that a planned sequel was never made. And such a wonderful mix of multiple animation techniques was pretty much never used again on the big screen until Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse just over a year ago. A shame, really, because despite the issues, despite the problems, I still think that there are at least elements of greatness in here.